One of the main searches that leads people to our website is the phrase, "I hate sex." Boy, it seems there are a lot of women who can identify with that. And I'd say there certainly have been seasons in my marriage where I could have been the one typing in that search. This dynamic can lead to disappointment, frustration, and really a lot of conflict in your marriage. Here's the thing. I've never met a woman who didn't want to like sex, but I've met many who couldn't figure out how. For married women in this situation, you can feel like your husband is asking for something that is physically or emotionally difficult for you. And so sex becomes a duty, which probably makes you hate it even more. Now, if this describes you, the most important thing you can do is identify and address the barriers. Something is getting in the way of physical intimacy and pleasure, so what is it? There are a couple different kinds of barriers that can get in the way of enjoying sex. The first one is physical barriers. Now, there's lots of different things that can be going on with your body that can impact sexual desire and response. Medications like antidepressants or conditions like a thyroid disorder, just to name a few. And then you've got the complexity of female hormones. Boy, it's difficult to understand all the different hormones that are playing in the process of a woman's cycle and how that impacts sexual desire and pleasure. To add to that, sex can be physically painful for many women. The American College of Gynecology estimates that at some point, 75% of women experience sexual pain, but only half of them have ever told their partner. Now, if you experience sexual pain or have no sex drive, it's really important for you to be honest with your husband and seek medical help. Now, it can be awkward to bring this up with your doctor or even with your OBGYN, and you may have to be really tenacious in seeking help. But there are growing specialties like pelvic floor therapists and sex therapists who can help women overcome these variables. Don't ignore the pain. The worst thing you can do is push through it. If sex is painful for you, if it's uncomfortable for you, and you continue to engage, that just trains your body to dread sex more and more. And so it's important for you to name that barrier and to seek the help you need to overcome it. The second type of barrier that you might be experiencing is emotional barriers. The two greatest emotional barriers are trauma and shame. You know, at least 1 in every 4 women have experienced sexual trauma before the age of 18, and that number is probably much higher than that. If you've experienced sexual trauma, your body has learned that sex is dangerous, and your body remembers trauma. And so engaging sexually, sexual touch or sensations can trigger that feeling of anxiety and fear. Emotional trauma connected to sexual brokenness is often so deep that you might not even be aware of it. Many women don't remember the details of childhood sexual trauma until later into adulthood. They might simply carry some vague sense of something's not right, or I just don't enjoy this, or I just can't relax. Now, you can work past trauma and your fear and anxiety, but it's going to take work. I recommend that you get in touch with a trauma therapist who's trained in walking with women like you through that, because you really can find freedom. The second kind of emotional barrier is shame. Maybe you feel ashamed of your past. Just sex brings up that feeling of guilt and shame that you can't shake. Or maybe shame came from religious teaching where you learned that sex outside of marriage is wrong and you actually heard that sex is wrong. You don't know how to make that shift. Having sexual desire or experience just feels wrong to you. And so you don't know how to be godly and sexual at the same time. A lot of Christian or Catholic women can experience this, and they don't know how to let themselves truly experience the joy and freedom that God created sex to represent. We've seen many women find freedom by learning about the truth about God's design for sex and the beauty of what He experienced marital sexuality to be like. Click on some of the links below that will take you to resources that get into exactly why God designed sex and how to enjoy it within a Christian sexual relationship. So we've talked about physical barriers, we've talked about some emotional barriers, but you also need to look into relational barriers. You know, you can have a great marriage and a horrible sex life, but the quality of your marriage is often the foundation of sexual intimacy. And this is particularly true of women who tend to respond sexually when they feel emotionally connected and cared for. And if you're not feeling that in your marriage, it might be really hard to be vulnerable. Sexuality represents some of the greatest areas of tenderness and vulnerability for women. And this can lead to a woman hating sex because it requires her to trust and be vulnerable when she doesn't feel emotionally safe within her marriage. Unresolved conflicts can simmer into emotional coldness where it just doesn't feel like you want to be close to your spouse. Maybe there's a lack of trust from a betrayal or deceit. If you don't address that, you're never going to be able to feel safe and vulnerable. And insensitivity can make a woman feel like she needs to protect herself. If your husband's making comments about your body, or there's patterns in your relationship that make you feel objectified, like your husband referring to you or using you as a sexual object rather than wanting to make love to you, that can make you feel very distant and make you not want to engage sexually. It may be very difficult for you to address those relational barriers with just you and your husband. All of us need somebody speaking into our relationship. In my own marriage, my husband and I at different seasons have gone to marriage counseling. We've asked for help from mentor couples or individuals that can really help us navigate conflicts and difficult patterns and issues that make us feel distant. So don't just try to solve this and communicate this on your own, but reach out to people who have wisdom and can help you navigate some difficult conversations. It may take courage to seek out a doctor, a therapist, or a small group for help in some of these areas, but let me just tell you, it's worth it. You don't have to be that woman 5 years from now typing in, "I still hate sex." You can actually experience the beauty and the fullness that God designed you to have as a married woman within your sexual relationship with your husband.